The battlefield was silent. Smoke floated in the air. Fires burned in the distance. Broken machines, fallen bodies, and deep craters covered the red alien ground. Among the ruins, one figure moved slowly. A human soldier, tall, strong, with dust. On his face and blood on his armor, walked with heavy steps. His rifle was loaded. His eyes sharp. He was the last man standing on his side. And then he saw her, an alien woman, kneeling, head down, shoulders shaking. Her armor was cracked. Her arms were bleeding. Her long hair was stuck to her dirty face. She was young. Maybe his age, maybe younger. Her body trembled as she waited. She expected death. She had heard the stories. Humans showed no mercy. Humans were monsters. If a human found you after battle, they would shoot you without a second thought. So she didn't move. She dropped her weapon hours ago. She had no strength left to fight. Her friends were dead. Her ship was destroyed. She had nothing left. So she waited to die. The human stopped in front of her. He looked down. His shadow fell over her body like a dark cloud. She closed her eyes and whispered in her alien tongue, "Make it quick." But nothing happened. No pain. No shot. Just silence. She slowly opened one eye, then the other. She looked up carefully. The human soldier was still standing there, but his rifle was lowered. He wasn't aiming at her. In fact, he had slung it over his back. In his hand was something else. A water bottle. She blinked. Confused, he walked forward and gently placed the bottle on the ground near her. Then he took 2 steps back. Her lips were dry. Her throat burned, but still, she didn't touch the bottle. It could be a trick. Maybe poisoned water. Maybe a test. He noticed her hesitation. The human spoke, his voice calm, deep, and strange. To her ears, "Drink, it's clean." She didn't understand the words, but the tone was not angry. Still, she didn't move. The human slowly took off his helmet. His face was tired. His eyes were kind. That made her even more confused. She had never seen kind eyes on a human. Why wasn't he killing her? Why was he helping her? She finally reached out slowly and grabbed the bottle. Her hands shook as she opened it. She sniffed it. Just water. Then she drank. The cool liquid touched her tongue, and she gasped. It was like life returning to her body. She finished the bottle and looked up again. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why?" The human soldier tilted his head. He didn't understand her language, but he could see the question in her eyes. Slowly sat down on a rock nearby, careful not to startle her. He pulled out a small photo from his pocket and looked at it. A human child and an alien woman stood together, smiling. She noticed the picture. Her eyes widened. A human with an alien family? He saw her looking and offered the photo to her. She took it gently and stared. Her heart beat faster. The alien in the photo was her kind. She looked back at him, confused. "You love her?" she asked in a weak voice, pointing to the alien woman in the photo. He gave a small nod. She looked away, her eyes filling with tears. Everything she had been told was a lie. Maybe not all humans were killers. Maybe not all were cruel. She touched her chest where her heart beat slow and tired. The human noticed her wound. He stood, walked to her, and without asking, pulled a small med pack from his belt. She flinched as he got close, but he simply knelt down and gently cleaned the blood from her arm. It stung. She gritted her teeth. Then he wrapped a soft bandage around the wound. When he finished, he gave her space again. Sat down. Watched the sunset over the battlefield. She sat in silence. She didn't know what to think anymore. She had prepared to die. But now she had water in her belly, a bandage on her arm, and hope in her chest. After a long silence, she spoke again, slowly and softly. "My name is Kale." The human looked at her and smiled faintly. "I'm Mason," he said. They couldn't understand each other's words, but it didn't matter. For the first time in her life, Kale didn't feel fear around. A human. She felt something strange. Something new. Trust. Asterisk. Kale woke up gasping. She had dreamed of cold metal chains wrapped tight around her arms. In the dream, someone was dragging her face down across sharp stones. She cried out, but no one listened. Just like before, but when she opened her eyes, she was lying on a soft blanket under a large tree. A small fire crackled beside her. The sky above was dark, sprinkled with stars, and nearby sat the human. Mason. He had kept the fire going all night. She blinked. Her body still ached, but her wounds were no longer bleeding. Her arm had been cleaned again. A real bandage now covered it, not one made for battle, but for healing. Kale stared at him quietly. He wasn't sleeping. He was just watching the stars. She didn't know how to feel. Confused, grateful, scared. Back on her homeworld, her people used to say, if a human captures you, you'll beg for death within a day. It had been a day now, but he hadn't hurt her, not once. Kale sat up slowly. Mason turned to her and gave a short nod. No smile, no words, just a calm look, like he was telling her, you're safe. I'm here. She noticed something beside her. A bag, his bag. Curiosity tugged at her. When he turned away, she reached out slowly and opened the side flap. Inside were supplies, rations, tools, and something small and square. A photo. She froze. It was the same photo from before. The alien woman and the little human girl. But this time, she noticed something new. The alien woman had Kale's eye color and markings like hers. Her heart jumped. Could it be? Was that woman her cousin? She hadn't seen her in years, not since the war began. Kale held the photo tightly in her shaking hands. Mason noticed. He walked over, gently took the photo back, and looked at it for a long time. Then, without saying anything, he pointed at the woman in the picture and made a soft gesture, placing his hand over his heart. Kale's voice trembled. She saved you, didn't she? Of course, he didn't understand her words, but again, he nodded slowly. Kale looked down at her feet. Her wrists still had mark scars from old chains. She remembered the cages, the beatings, the way her people treated captured enemies. And yet here she was, being given warmth, safety, and medicine by the very race she was taught to hate. Why? She whispered again. Why not chain me? Why not punish me like we punished your kind? Mason sat down beside her and pulled something else from his bag. A protein bar. He opened it in half and handed her one piece. Kale took it carefully. The moment her fingers touched the food, she froze. Because in her world, only family shares food during wartime. This meant something. She stared at him, and this time, tears formed in her eyes. You don't know me, she whispered. You should hate me. Mason just looked at her, silent, steady, and calm. Kale suddenly stood up and turned her back to him. She didn't walk away. She just needed a moment to breathe. She was shaking. Not from fear, from confusion. He had done everything the opposite of what she expected. No chains. No threats. No harsh orders. Only help. In silence, she turned back to him after a few minutes. I don't understand humans, she said softly. Mason tilted his head, as if trying to read her soul. Kale stepped closer and slowly sat down next to him again. She spoke carefully now, one word at a time, hoping he might catch her meaning. Not enemy. Mason blinked. Then nodded. She continued, pointing to herself. Kale, no fight. Then she touched his arm gently. You safe. A moment passed. Mason gave a small smile. He reached into the dirt and picked up a small stone. Then, with the tip of his knife, he carved a symbol into it. Kale watched closely. It was simple. A line between two circles. One big, one small. Then he held it out to her. She didn't understand at first. Then he pointed to himself, the big circle, and to her, the small one. The line between them? It was peace. A bridge. She touched the stone and held it to her chest. For the first time since the war, she smiled, not a fake one, a real, soft smile. Mason stood and put more wood on the fire. Cale looked at the flames. Maybe she was wrong about humans. Maybe this one was different. Maybe the chains she feared were already broken. She didn't run at first. She thought about it every time the human turned his back. Every time he walked ahead or stepped away to gather supplies. The idea burned inside her like a secret flame. You can escape now. He won't chase you. He trusts you. But something always stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of that warm fire. Maybe it was the food he shared. Maybe it was the way he treated her wounds with care. Not force, or maybe she didn't want to leave. But one night, when the wind howled louder than usual and Mason fell into a deep sleep beside the fire, her old instincts won. Cale stood up slowly. She moved like a shadow, quiet, soft, careful. She looked down at him. He had taken off his helmet. His face looked peaceful, even kind. She whispered, "I'm sorry," then turned toward the hills. She ran, not because she hated him, but because she couldn't understand him. He made her feel things she didn't trust, like safety, peace, hope, and she didn't know how to carry those feelings. So she ran, but the alien night was colder than she remembered. The wind cut through her thin armor like knives. The rocks sliced her feet, and the sky above growled with storm clouds ready to break. Still, she ran until her legs gave out. She collapsed near a dry riverbed, gasping for breath, hugging herself for warmth. Hours passed. She was alone, truly alone. She thought about crawling into a small cave and letting the cold take her. Maybe that would be easier than feeling everything the human had stirred in her chest. But then she heard it. Bootsteps. She turned her head weakly. Mason. He stood just a few feet away, breathing hard from running. A flashlight in his hand, his jacket now missing. She expected yelling. Anger. Punishment. But he just knelt beside her. He didn't speak. He simply wrapped his jacket around her body, picked her up in his arms, and began walking back. Cale was too tired to resist. She leaned against his chest, whispering, "Why do you keep doing this?" The night answered with silence. Back at the fire, he laid her down gently. She was shivering. He added more fuel to the flames, then unzipped his own sleeping bag and placed it over her. Cale watched him through half-open eyes. "You didn't chain me." He looked at her. "No," he said softly. She closed her eyes. "I tried to leave. You knew I would. But you still helped me." Mason didn't reply. He just sat down beside the fire, silent. Cale opened her eyes again after a moment. "I don't understand. You could control me, break me. Why don't you?" He finally looked her in the eyes and spoke slowly, choosing his words. "Because you are not mine to own." Cale stared at him. Those words echoed in her heart. Not mine to own. She was free. Truly free. And for the first time in her life, someone had treated her like that. Not a tool, not an enemy, not property. Just a person. She sat up a little, pulling the sleeping bag tighter around herself. "I thought freedom meant running away," she said. He looked at her with calm eyes. "But freedom also means choosing to stay," he answered. That night, Cale didn't run again. Instead, she stayed by the fire, silent, thoughtful, and warm. She had escaped. But not from him. She had escaped from the chains inside her own heart. Asterisk. Cale was no longer afraid of waking up. That was new. Before, every day started with panic. Where was she? Who held the chains? Would they beat her again? But now, she woke to firelight, to soft blankets, and sometimes even the quiet sound of the human humming while boiling water. This morning, something strange happened. Mason tossed her a stick, not for fire, but for training. Cale caught it with wide eyes. "What's this?" she asked, gripping it tightly. Mason picked up a longer stick and stood across from her. He motioned for her to stand. Kale tilted her head. You want to fight? He shook his head, then pointed at the rising sun. Then to the hills. Then to the stick. She began to understand. You want me to learn? She asked. He nodded once. She rose slowly, her legs still sore from her escape, her arms still weak from past injuries, but something inside her wanted to stand tall. They began. He showed her how to grip the stick, not tight, not loose. How to block, how to dodge. He didn't use force. He didn't try to dominate her. Moved like a teacher. Kale tried, but she failed again and again. She fell twice. Once, the stick hit her shoulder. It stung, but Mason reached out every time, offering a hand to help her up. He never laughed at her, never mocked her weakness, only waited. Patient, strong, kind. Kale had never been trained like this. In her army, training meant yelling, beating, punishing. Here, it meant trust. Respect. By sunset, she had learned how to block 3 moves and swing properly without losing balance. She smiled. Real smile, not because she was strong now, but because someone believed she could be. That evening they sat by the fire again. Mason handed her a small metal box. She opened it to find a few seeds and a tiny sprout growing inside. She looked at him, puzzled. He pointed to the sprout, then to her. She frowned. I'm not a plant. He chuckled softly. Then he mimed the sprout growing, rising, reaching toward the sky. Kale stared at the little green leaf. Then she understood. You think I'm growing? He gave a small nod. That night, she whispered to the stars, I don't want to be a weapon anymore. The next day, she picked up the training stick before he could even ask. But this time, she smiled when she did. The scream of a dying animal echoed through the night. Kale's eyes snapped open. She reached for the stick by her side, her heart pounding. The fire had burned low. The night was darker than usual. Clouds hid the stars. The wind carried a strange smell, burnt oil and blood. Mason was already on his feet. He grabbed his rifle, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the trees. Kale crouched beside him. What is it? She whispered. He pointed toward the north ridge, and then they heard it. Again. Footsteps. Not one, not two, many. Kale's stomach turned cold. Scavengers. These weren't soldiers. These were worse beings who roamed battlefields, searching for weapons, tech, and weak survivors to steal or sell. They didn't take prisoners. They took parts. Kale stood up, breath shaking. We need to run. Mason glanced at her and shook his head. He loaded his weapon. No time. Kale grabbed her stick and backed toward the campfire. I can fight. Mason gave her a look, half proud, half concerned. Then came the first flash. A scavenger leapt from the shadows, swinging a jagged blade. Mason turned and fired clean shot. One down, but 2 more rushed in. Kale didn't wait. She stepped forward and swung her stick with all her strength. Crack. It hit one in the side of the head. He screamed and dropped. She gasped. Her hands hurt. Her arms shook. But she didn't stop. Another one grabbed Mason from behind. Kale saw it and ran. She tackled the attacker. Biting, clawing, screaming with rage. The scavenger fell backward, and Mason broke free, turning to finish the fight. Breathing hard, they stood back to back. More shadows circled them. Kale whispered, We won't survive this. Mason looked at her, eyes calm, steady. Yes, we will. Then something snapped in Kale, a memory. The training. The words, You're not a prisoner. You're a survivor. She gripped the stick and stepped forward. Facing the next wave, they came. And this time, Kale didn't hesitate. She ducked under a blade, hit a knee, spun around, striking just like Mason had shown her. She fought for him, for herself, not as a soldier, not as a tool, but as a person who chose to fight. Together, they pushed back the attackers. After what felt like hours, The last scavenger ran into the trees, screaming. Silence returned. Only the fire crackled. Kale dropped to her knees. Breath ragged. Her arms were bruised. Her stick was broken. Mason sat beside her, a cut bleeding above his eyebrow. They looked at each other. Kale whispered, "I didn't run this time." He smiled. "No," he said softly. "You stood your ground." She stared into the fire. "I thought I needed to escape you," she whispered, "but tonight, I was afraid to lose you." Mason reached into his pouch and took out a bandage. He handed it to her, but this time, she reached out and bandaged him first. Her hands were clumsy, shaking, but she did it with care. When she finished, he looked at her with tired but thankful eyes. Kale leaned back, looked at the night sky returning behind the clouds. "I used to think humans had no hearts," she whispered. Mason didn't speak. He didn't need to. His actions had already answered her. That night, Kale didn't sleep. By the fire, she slept beside him, guarding him like he had done for her. Kale found the journal by accident. It was buried at the bottom of Mason's pack under spare clothes, tools, and one sealed ration. She hadn't meant to open it. She was just looking for bandages. Mason had gone to find clean water. Her hands were still sore from the fight. Her legs were bruised. But her heart was full of noise. Questions, feelings, fears. And then she saw the old leather notebook. Simple, worn. Her fingers paused. She knew it was wrong, but her hands moved. Anyway, she opened the first page. It wasn't written in her language, but Mason's notes were mixed with sketches, drawings, memories, a child's hand, a woman's face, a burning building, a battlefield, a broken helmet, and next to each one, small words written carefully. "Too many died. I didn't pull the trigger that day. They called me a traitor, but I couldn't kill children." Kale's hands trembled. Each page spoke, louder than words. This was Mason's truth. He had been ordered to kill. He had stood in a war where soldiers were told to erase the enemy. But he didn't. He walked away from orders. He chose something else. She reached the last page. There was only one line written there. "If I can save just one, maybe I can forgive myself." Kale closed the book slowly. And for the first time, she cried without shame, not because she was weak, but because she finally understood. Mason wasn't a hero. He was broken, just like her, and still, he chose kindness. He chose to save her. When he returned with water, she was sitting beside the fire, the journal in her lap. She looked at him. No lies in her eyes. No fear. "I read it," she said simply. He didn't get angry. He didn't scold her. He just looked tired, exposed, like a man with no armor left. Kale stood up, holding the notebook tightly. "I thought humans were monsters," she said. "But you broke that image." She stepped closer. "You lost your people because you wouldn't kill mine. And I was ready to kill you the moment we met." She placed the journal back in his hands. "But you gave me life." Mason lowered his head. "I'm not a good man," he said slowly. Kale shook her head. "No, but you're trying to be, and that mattered more than perfection." That evening she did something she had never done before. She laughed. It was small, soft, quick, but it was real. Mason looked at her, surprised. Kale covered her mouth, still smiling. "I'm sorry, I just remembered how serious I always looked." "You still do," Mason replied with a smirk. She threw a pebble at him. He laughed too. That night, they sat by the fire not as strangers, but as two people with pain, healing. Together, Kale whispered, "Maybe we weren't enemies." Mason nodded. "Maybe we were both lost." She looked up at the stars. "I don't want to go back," she said softly, "to my world, to the way things were." Mason said nothing, but he handed her something small, his last communication beacon. One press, and a human ship would come. Kale looked at it, then at him. "You're letting me decide?" she asked. He nodded. She held the beacon in her hand and didn't press it. I'm not ready to leave, she said. Not yet. He smiled, and in that silence, something gentle passed between them, something unspoken. Something real. Asterisk. The day she expected to die was now 1 year behind her. Kale stood on a hill of soft red sand, the wind tugging at her hair. Below her, a small shelter made of human metal and alien stone stood quietly in the desert. A garden was growing outside it, and inside lived the human who had refused to kill her. Mason. She still remembered the moment she had knelt on broken ground, ready for his weapon to end her life. But instead, he gave her water. He gave her warmth. He gave her freedom. Now, she was no longer the same Kale. She had scars. Yes, but not all scars were bad. Some reminded her of survival. Some reminded her of him. Footsteps crunched behind her. She didn't need to turn. Mason stood beside her, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. You always come up here at sunset, he said. I like the view, she replied. He handed her the tea. She took it with a smile. Silence passed between them like an old friend. Then she asked, do you regret it? Regret what? Letting me live. Mason looked out at the horizon. You were supposed to be my enemy, he said. But I think you were the best decision I ever made. Kale smiled softly. A small human ship flew above in the distance. It didn't stop. She had the beacon. She still hadn't used it. She had chosen to stay, not because she was trapped, but because she had finally found something worth staying for. Mason pointed toward the garden. You planted those, he said. They're growing fast, she nodded. Like me, he chuckled. You were tougher than those seeds. I was harder to water, she added. They both laughed. Then Kale grew quiet. You saved me, Mason. No, he said. We saved each other. She turned to him. Do you ever think we were meant to meet? He shrugged. Maybe fate. Maybe luck. Maybe pain, she said. Pain brought us together. And healing kept us there, he added. They watched the sun dip below the alien mountains. Kale whispered. I came from war and found peace in your hands. He looked at her, really looked, not as an alien, not as a former enemy, but as someone who had become everything. Kale stepped closer and took his hand. I was ready to die, she said. He squeezed her hand gently. I was ready to live, he answered. But I didn't know how until I met you. The stars appeared in the sky above. 2 souls from 2 broken worlds stood beneath them. Together. Not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something new, something rare, something beautiful. Kale leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered the final truth. You didn't just spare my life, you became it.